previous sessions. You know how well they have been. I hope your faith has been increased. I hope that you have learned through this that God can do anything. Last week we had a great session talking about how that God protected, He preserved, He just made a way. And what a beautiful thing to know that we've got a God that cares. He's a personal friend. He's a personal Savior. And He will be for that to anybody that will allow Him to. We heard a lot of different stories last week of how that God just did miraculous happenings in their life. And we had covered in the previous week about how that they were going through turmoil. We touched on that again last week. But we're going to pick up this week with some of the turmoil that was going on right there in the church. And people not wanting them to have church. And they had been whipped. Our mother had been whipped at this time already. They had a court injunction. They had been sued. A lot of things was taking place. This is a young couple in their mid-20s that's following the call of God to start a church and to spread the gospel. And the devil don't like God's work. And he always tries to thwart it, but God is faithful. And if you'll be faithful to Him, He'll be faithful to you. If you would, I'd like for us to start today with just talking about some of the turmoil that you were dealing with them not wanting you to be in there having service.
Okay, right in the middle of all of this. Now, we didn't know we were supposed to be scared. We didn't know that we were supposed to be unhappy. So we just smiled. In fact, I almost got a whipping once for smiling. But
that's why I got one. She was tired of my smile.
Anyway, one Sunday morning we woke up, got ready for church, and when I don't remember if it was normal or not, but she went to church ahead of me. And
I think it was because of the situation. There was a truck sitting there in front of the door, and we knew there was a padlock. Somehow we already knew that. We probably saw it on Saturday night.
The church, somebody had put a padlock on the door.
And there was a truck sitting there in front of the door. There was a car that had already gotten there. So I went up there. I saw one of the ladies from the church.
Yeah, that was it. She said, I see her pulling in, and they have threatened to whip her too. So she said, I'm going on up there and be with her.
It was a different lady. It wasn't Sister Linda.
Okay. Well, I thought it probably might have been. But anyway, when she got there, there was a man sitting in the back of that truck. Had he pulled up toward the door, pretty close. He's sitting in the back there with a shotgun across his knees. And he said, if anybody goes in this church today, it'll be over my dead body. So, you know, it was nearly church time, getting close. People started gathering in, and they were stopping back out by the road, you know, because of the danger.
If you see a man with a gun, first thing you do is stop or go the other direction.
Well, she and I, the lady that was there, we didn't know exactly what to do, but we knew we wasn't going to get in the church, so we just walked around.
Dead body.
Yeah, we walked, well, neither one of us had a gun, so we walked around the church just with our hands raised, praying, and actually probably crying, because we knew that the situation was a serious situation. And I went back to the house and told him, and he went up there then and directed the people.
I just walked to the edge of the lot, and of course I knew he would like a confrontation, but I'd never been confrontational before and wasn't going to start then. So I just called to all of the people that most of them were there then, and they were holding their distance, of course. But why they didn't leave, you know, it's amazing. But I said, come on down to my house. It was a sunny morning. I said, we'll have church in my yard. Y'all come on down here. So they all just made their way to my house, which about 100
No sound system, no cheers, nothing, just let's go have church.
I had a 100-watt voice, so. We had church that morning,
Sitting out.
and believe it or not, I mean, we just had a powerful church that day. And it was refreshing to be in service like we had. There was no talking about any problems or any troubles or anything like that. We just had church. Now, we didn't have Sunday school and then preaching. We just went right on into the worship.
We'll have worship service.
Yeah, we had worship service.
No music, but just
And
church.
then we had the preaching. And that afternoon, I borrowed a tent and put up in my yard. So that night, We had church again in a tent, but we did have a covering
Okay, you borrowed a tent from someone there in town?
in town, yeah.
Okay. Back up, because you had mentioned this to me before about how that when you guys come into the yard to have church that morning.
Yeah, we had an older gentleman, Brother Rhodes, and he was very high-spirited, very lively fella. And of course, he was, I don't know his age at this time, but probably nearing 70 at this time. And I had a couple of rocks I'd gotten out of the river down near Cherokee and put in the front yard, painted them, with my name and so forth. Well, when I moved, I carried them up there. And just as you come out of my driveway over into the yard, those rocks were there on the edge of the road, or at the edge of the road. He pounced up on those rocks, and he told about Moses in the victory for the children of Israel, when Aaron and Hur had to get up there and hold his hands up.
Yeah.
And he said, now, he told that story real quickly, and he said, now I've got one of Brother Hodums' hands. Who's going to get the other one?
Yeah. And when you look at that scripture in the Bible, when they held his hands up, there was no defeat.
That's right.
There was, when they were holding his hands up, God blessed them with victory and with power over the enemy. And here he was just following what he knew that had happened before. It had been a precedent set by God's people. And he says, well, let's do this again.
Yeah.
It's worked. Let's try this again.
Well, it works. It still works.
Still work.
So we had good church. We set the tent up that afternoon, and it was wintertime, but that was a mild day. And through the week, it turned real cold. And we had Friday night service, and I'm sure the severe cold come in maybe on Saturday. And on Saturday morning, I had a radio broadcast every Saturday morning that covered our county. So I announced on there that we were going to be having church in my yard in a tent, and didn't say why or anything else. So, I mean, the whole county.
The church is still padlocked at this time.
That's right. And I talked to the sheriff about it. He said, knock that padlock off. And there's no business if it being on there. And I said, okay. I said, they've been kind of violent before. And he said, I'll drive by about church time. You knock it off, we won't have church. I went to the sheriff after this. But anyway,
All right.
on that next Sunday morning, it was bitter cold and the snow on the ground and a snow on the tent. But we had church. Had an appointment with Mr. Hollis on Monday. And when I got in there, this is the attorney. He was grinning because he had heard the radio broadcast. Know we had church in a tent. And he smiling kind of shy like, and he said, well, how many did you have in church in that tent yesterday? I said, well, our number was off some. We had 52. And he went to the first church in Waynesboro. He said, that's more than we had. He said, our folks just don't come out in bad weather.
I would like to say it was winter time. It was, the cold season, and he had preached at another church during the week. And when they found out that we were in a tent, they blessed us with an offering to buy a heater for it. But, if we'd have had 5 heaters, I'm not sure it would have made much difference.
He's under a tent.
Unless you're standing right there in front of it. But we did have a heater by Sunday morning. But it, I don't know how much good it did, but we run it.
We didn't have Sunday night service, but we did have Sunday morning. During the process, either that week or the following week one, I don't know which, someone come by, and I must have been gone because I didn't hear it happen, but they took a shotgun and shot buckshot through the side curtains of that tent and out through the top of it, and just went in at an angle. And, of course, it riddled holes all through the top of the tent in 2 big spots, so I'm sure there was 2 shots that went up through there with, looked like buckshot. And it didn't stop us. We just went right ahead having church. Somebody told that they shot through the tent and us having church, but it didn't happen that way. We probably weren't even at home because I never knew when the shots were fired.
Yeah.
But it was,
So you're having church in a tent. How long did you have to have church in the tent?
just that weekend. sheriff told me then to knock that lock off, and he said, I'll be there. He never showed up.
Would you just knock the lock
We
off?
just knocked the lock off and went on in. The man wasn't sitting in his truck with a shotgun the next Sunday, and we just went right on in.
Well, I'm sure the sheriff probably got him word not to be,
Probably did.
there is a First Amendment.
Yeah, but we're not talking about constitutional folks right now.
So you're back in the church, back in the church.
Back in the
having church.
We are.
What all's going on now? I mean, what,
Well, it looks like that we're not paying any attention to what they're doing. And so probably, I don't know whether it was weeks ahead or just shortly after that, on Saturday night, when we were in revival. It's amazing when we have a meeting with the ministers of our area to set our schedules for the annual revival at the football field. They would tell me their schedule, where our annual revival is so-and-so and our annual revival is so-and-so, so we wouldn't have conflict of scheduling. And I got tickled while they were all telling theirs. I said, look, we may have 3 revivals between now and then at our church. But we just stayed in church. And we were in revival again. And after the Saturday night service, or Sunday night service,
Saturday night, because
Okay.
I had to make church the next day.
almost everybody was gone. We stayed in the church just talking, and there was a neighboring preacher there that visited, and then a preacher from Savannah area had visited, and they were still there talking to us. And the local preacher's daughter, grown daughter, she was there, and
There was another preacher there too, but I can't remember
I can't
just
remember
who
just
it
who
was.
he was, but there was 3 preachers and us.
And
and one of
the
the
preacher's
preacher's
daughter.
And when we stepped out of the church onto the little porch,
was there any of the church members still there?
no,
No, all of the church
well,
family had come.
Belinda,
Well, yeah,
drove up
there
from
was a young
Cherokee.
lady, she come up and
she
stay
was
with
there.
us on the weekends
And-
usually.
yeah, I mean, she was just a close friend before we moved up there, so she
Come up on the
continued up there in
weekends.
church, and she was there.
But she stayed with us usually every weekend.
But
and
as soon
come
as
up.
we walked out of the church, there was 3 men there and
Well,
2 women,
Yeah.
and the 2 women grabbed her.
Well, one of the ladies stepped up and I had Anna by then. She was the baby.
Okay.
And
So we had, Jennifer was born when you went to college, John was born when y'all started the church.
just
And
that
then
year.
Joanna, who we refer to as Anna,
Yeah.
is a baby now, so this was
She was
74.
born- That's
This is
right, she was born in
1974.
January of 74, so this was right after, this is the year after he's, told all this stuff. But one of them come up there and I had Anna in my arms and he had John, and she just slapped me and took the baby out of my arms and handed her to
Is this
Belinda.
one of the same women that had,
Whipped me before, yeah.
okay,
She's the one that slapped me so much for grinning. She was tired of my grinning. Anyway, she slapped me and took Anna out of my arms and handed her to Belinda and told her, said, take this baby and get out of here. So, by this time, the other lady had stepped up there and they had, I don't know if you gave John to Belinda or Belinda got John from you.
She got him and put him in the car.
And Jennifer was big enough to take care of herself, and get to the car. And so the bigger lady then, she got me by the hair of the head and dragged me off the porch. Well, there I am. And she is beating me with her fists. And, just in the face and in the head. And I honestly, I look back on it and I think, well, everybody will think you're crazy. But I understand Stephen, how he prayed, Lord, don't hold this to their account. Because I prayed for her. And you can believe what you want to. I did not feel this. I don't know if I'm just hard-headed or what. I didn't feel it. But I was being addled. I knew that I couldn't think. But anyway, she was beating me. And she was just, breathing out threatenings to me. And I was praying for her. I said, now, Lord, I don't know the other things that she's done in her life. But what she's doing against me, I'm asking you not to hold it against her, because she don't know what she's doing. Well, finally, that preacher's daughter, I don't think they'd care for us using their name. Brother Dan Wallace was a mighty man, a great man. And he was standing there, and his daughter, Sister Magdalene, was standing over there by the door, and she had her hands raised in the air, and she was just talking in tongues the whole time. And Brother Dan finally stepped between me and this lady, and he said, "You can hit me if you want to, but you're not going to hit her anymore." And he just pushed me back and just stepped between us. Well, he was running from 3 men. They was after him. You want to tell that?
Well, it's hard to tell. You think about 3 men just jumping on you at one time.
Yeah.
It was
But
terrible.
I thought while they were hitting me, if I wanted to fight, I could whip all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And one of them, the heavy one, drew back, and he swung as hard as he could swing and completely missed me. And I thought he was going to fall down. And honestly, I wanted to laugh. But the only bit that really ever hurt me, out of 5 minutes or so, one of them, I had my head over like this, one of them connected with the end of my nose. And you've heard of seeing stars. It seemed like a reality. But one of the other preachers said, if I had a stick behind my truck seat, and I thought about it because he had been a rough man. He said, I thought about getting it out and just knocking all 3 of them out. But they never moved in that direction. Nobody
Retaliated.
No.
They just stood there and prayed. They
And-
really did.
That's right. And it was, it's amazing that 3 men, and they were all big, could be on you like that. And I kept thinking, if they get me down, now they'll stomp me bad. So I struggle to stand up.
Well, in just a little bit, he came by after Brother Wallace had stepped between us. I was just standing there. I couldn't think of what to do. That's why I said I was addled, and I didn't know what to do. I was just standing there, and he come by me and he said, "Mom, get in the car." So I went and got in the car, and we went to the house. He come, got in the car, and we went to the house. Well, there was some of the preachers, 2 of them came. I don't believe Brother Wallace and Sister Magdalene didn't come down there. But the others came and wanted to know if there was anything I could do. To let this be known, we couldn't use our phone because it was a party line. And so I told them to call, certain of the people and let them know. And another lady in the church, she knew she was on the same party line. And I had asked her before, could I ever use her name if I said anything, and she said she didn't care. It was Wanda Birmingham. She lived right around the road from us. And she wasn't going to use her phone, but she was going to go call some of the church folks too.
When I was saying party line, there was 4 of us in the neighborhood.
And we knew
Had the same line.
neither of us could use the
Young
line.
folks don't know anything
No.
about party lines.
But if you was on the party line and somebody else was on, you could pick up and listen to their conversation.
That's true.
No privacy.
But she went uptown to call and use was there one phone booth in
It's
town?
one payphone in town.
And she was going up there to call from it, and one of the ladies followed her up there, and when she got out, she knocked her down on the concrete there, and beat her head on the concrete, and broke her glasses. And when we didn't know this was going on because we had gone to the house, so she came around and told us it was a pretty tough night, and I had to hold ice packs on my eyes till about 3 o'clock in the morning because I knew the next morning was Sunday and I was going to church.
Can't stop.
Why not? Who wants to stop now?
No quit. No quit.
Can't stop now. So here we go. We go back to church the next day, and I remember, I'd hold my head down.
Can
'Cause
you recall the feelings of walking back into the church or pulling back up on the churchyard, wondering what's going to happen today?
Well,
it didn't
this
cross my
Sunday
mind. I just gonna do
This
whatever
Sunday
I
is a
can do.
remarkable Sunday. Now, we had good church, but we're going to have church on Sunday night again. And of course, a a lot of this stuff has happened at night. But that Sunday night,
Well, let's tell about that Sunday morning is the reason we had so much company that night. We went to church and I had 2 black eyes, but like I said, I tried to keep my head down because I didn't want anybody feeling sorry for me. Wasn't no sense in that. And after church, there was a fellow he's dead now too, but he was as tall as you, Glenn. He was as tall as Brother Hodums, and I was out there, and I come out on the porch, and he was standing right in front of me, and he said, "How are you, Sister Hodums?" And I said, "I'm just fine, how are you?" And I wouldn't look up. He said, "Look at me." And I looked up, and when I did, his jaw twisted, and he got mad. And that night was when we had some real issues that night too. It's a little bit tough.
well,
It's hard talking about all this because it was real and it's still real. But that night, well, we had church, and of course, by that night, everybody in Wayne County knew what was going on nearly. And by the time church was to start, there was cars all the way around to the woods.
there was 4 of them out there with their guns at the churchyard that night.
Yes.
Of these people that was trying to,
Yeah,
They
and,
weren't going to let us have church.
they were,
said.
they were just standing there waiting on us. Brother Browder had come over to be in church. Now, he lived back over on this side of the river, out of Savannah. Don't know exactly where he lived, but in that area. And he come over to have church. They knew him, and they liked him. So they called him Shorty, and this is his own words, he told me. They said, "Now, Shorty, there's going to be a killing around here tonight. So you go on back home. We like you, and we don't want you involved in this." So it scared him bad. He said, I run fast to get back across to Savannah. And he said, when I got about halfway across Coffee Bottom, that's on this side of the river from Savannah, he said, I got to thinking, I know this is going to happen. And if I don't warn them, his blood will be on my hands.
So he come back to warn us.
Before church time, he come back to my house. And he told me, he said, don't go up there. These 4 of them standing out there right now with the guns.
He said, they mean business. They're going to kill you.
So I told him, I said, well, I'll go up there, but I'll wait until everybody else is there. They're not going to shoot you in front of everybody, I thought. But probably they would. And
We didn't know.
cars was backed up all the way to the woods in the road. And I'm sitting there looking out off the front porch up that way. And Brother Gene Jones comes down the road in his car. And he said, you probably ought not to go up there. And I could see a highway patrol car lined up in the line of cars almost back to the woods, the highway patrol car was. I said, I'm going to get in your car and you drive me past there and keep going until we get that highway patrol car, and I'm going to talk to him. So we drove right past there, and sure enough, there they stood with their guns right at the edge of the churchyard. And I went around there, and it was our sergeant. In fact, at that time, I think he was the only highway patrol assigned to our county. But he was a great big man. Don't think he was afraid of anything. And I got out of Brother Gene's car and went over and got in the car with him. He said, what's going on out here? And I started telling him, he said, I don't know nothing about it. I hadn't heard nothing about it. Well, we hadn't been talking it, you know. If our church folks hadn't spread the word, nobody else would know anything about it. But when I started telling him this, he said, well, there's a deputy, I can't stay, but there's a deputy sheriff on his way over here, and he's going to stay until church is over. And I said, which deputy is it? And when he told me his name, I said, that's his daddy and his 2 uncles and his cousin.
they don't help.
To stand up there with, and this is the deputy that arrested me that time. I said, now, I like him, but that's the wrong man's sin over here, and the sheriff knew that. And of course, Brother Browder done told me, he said, now they told me, the sheriff said beat you all they wanted to, and maybe the Lord tell you to move on. doubt it. And the sheriff had just turned and offered us no help, no protection, and it'd make him mad every time I asked him for any help. But he first wasn't that way. He said, yeah, I'll help you. And he said, I know enough on one of them to put him in the pen the rest of his life. But then he turned away and wouldn't help at all. So when I told Mr. McAllister this, that, you know, that was his uncles and daddy up there with the shotguns and rifles, he said, I'll stay. So we got back up there, and actually the sheriff had arrived by that time, probably come in the other side. And he was there with a special investigator from the Attorney General's office. And he told me, he said, preacher, I want you to have church, but you have it in a hurry. I've got an investigator from the Attorney General's office, and we're investigating a murder, and we can't stay out here long. But I'm going to stay with you until then. Well, I wouldn't have trusted his presence, no way.
Was this the deputy sheriff?
No, this was the sheriff
himself.
Yeah. He had the investigator from the Attorney General's office with him on another case. But,
Let me say this, that Brother Gene come back and got me and the children then, and we went up there, and when we got up there, the highway patrolman had backed up till he was right in front of the churchyard. And when I got out of the car, one of the men that knew him real well from the church called me over there and said, come here, Sister Hodum. And when I walked over there, he said, look at this highway patrolman. And when that highway patrolman saw me, he got mad, really mad. And he wasn't going nowhere. He wasn't going to leave. And he said, now this is what they did last night. So, you know, we had church. But after church.
Well, I hate to interrupt. We're out of time.
Oh, okay.
It's sad, but
these sessions are too short.
they're short. However, the thing about it is, we have got to the place where you're fixing to have church. Not without the devil's rearing his ugly head. But again, every time that the devil shows up, God shows up and does greater than what the devil can do.
And the church was packed out with people, and the power of God fell that night in a great way. And all the law officers that were there, and the Attorney General's investigator, they all got to witness what was, of course, they didn't come inside.
But they got the experience.
And the community showed up that night. Besides the folks that come to church, men with knives and guns and chains and sticks and axe handles was patrolling the churchyard.
They said, preacher, wasn't nobody going to get a whipping. Not any of y'all were going to get a whipping tonight.
Well, I say this, folks, it doesn't say he won't put trials in our way, but it is a good life living for the Lord. And to know that you can go through whatever situation, whatever life has dealt you, whatever you're facing at this moment, if you'll stay true to God, He'll stay true to you.
That's true.
And you'll come out of it on the other side stronger and victorious as long as you've got your trust in God. And again, this is not for the patty cake religion people. This is for somebody that's sold out and dedicated to whatever God's will is for their life. Thank you for watching today. We'll be back next week. You don't want to miss it. It's going to get better. We'll see you next week.